So my name is Bob Aiello, and we will be talking about why we should use ITIL. And ITIL, of course, is a framework, which means that it is a set of best practices, and it's a very comprehensive set of best practices that are published by an organization known as the ITSMF, and their focus is on IT service management. So I always tell people the real way to look at this is that the focus is on delighting your customers with excellent service. So an organization that uses ITIL as a framework for how they handle their customer service function really presents their approach as having a strong customer emphasis. And very often their services are considerably more efficient and effective than you find with organizations that don't take the time to employ the ITIL framework. And part of what we're going to be talking about is why that is true. I should also mention that for some organizations, it's also important to meet compliance requirements. So ITIL is one of the approaches, and that can help you meet all of your compliance requirements. And with many companies, it also helps you meet your contractual obligations. In other words, you might be doing business with a company, and I've worked for firms that had this, where part of their contractual obligations was they were using a framework such as ITIL to manage their IT service. Now, I always like to start off with a little story that kind of brings home my personal view on IT service management. Recently, I purchased a somewhat expensive headset that I use for podcasting, and unfortunately, I accidentally lost the USB stick. And I called up the company's help desk, and I explained to them what had occurred, and I asked them if they could possibly just sell me the USB stick. I still had the headset, and the story kind of began with the help desk person saying to me that they really didn't sell the USB stick separately, and I was starting to get pretty annoyed. Fortunately, that was not the end of the story. But before I tell you what the end of that story is, let me tell you a little bit about what IT service management really means. So IT service management is the implementation and management of quality IT services that meets the needs of the business. So our focus is on running our business. Now, it's a combination of people, process, and information technology. And what that means is that we consider all of our own people issues. Do we have the right staff? Are they trained properly? Do they know what to do on a day-to-day basis? And we have repeatable processes, which means if you call in on a Monday, you'll get the same response as if you call in on a Tuesday. And when I explain this to people, I often say to them, if you call up in an emergency and you ask for the fire department or police, you expect to get the same response whether, God forbid, your fire is on a Monday or a Tuesday. You expect to have a repeatable process. And that's very much what this is about. When you call into a help desk, you expect those services to be done in a reliable way and consistent regardless of what day you call in. But you also have to consider some of your own technical issues. So it's very much the people process and also some of the underlying technology issues. And ITIL really does a great job of helping you consider all three. Now, I always say to people, IT service management is the discipline of providing value to your customers with a strong focus on their perspective of the services that you're providing. Now, regardless of what framework you use, or regardless of whether you use standards, which is something in my other life that I'm very involved with the IEEE, defining a process is all about determining what your own goals and priorities are. You can't just implement somebody else's process model and expect to be successful. You also have to figure out what's going to work for your organization and, what your own priorities for your company really have to be. ITIL version 3 gives you the best practices based upon the wisdom of a group of experts. You really get to learn from other people that have been down this path already, and many of them really are industry experts. But at the end of the day, you're still defining. I could say, hey, you know, the best practice is to do this. This is great, but I may have to tailor a little bit, and I'm going to talk about that further. But most of all, don't reinvent the wheel. If there is a best practice that already exists for doing change management or any of the other functions we're going to talk about, ITIL version 3 gives you a set of best practices that are very widely respected, and it's a great idea to start there and to utilize those practices for your own business. Now, what exactly does ITIL help you do? Well, starting with, it helps you handle service requests, and we're going to talk about what that means. It also helps you handle what are called events and incidents, problems, and asset management, and a whole lot more. So with each of these, we're going to go into details on what exactly they are and how you might handle them. So a service request is a request for either information, might be a request for advice. It could be a standard change for access to an IT service. For example, you might have a service that gives you phone service and you want to add cable. You might be going on vacation and want to suspend your service for a couple of weeks or something like that. And it's usually handled by your service desk. And essentially, a service request is when your customer asks you to do something. Now, it also may trigger other things. In other words, you can get a phone call into your service desk and you're asked to do something, and it could turn out that that request triggers another request. For example, you might get the phone call, my account is not working, and it could turn out to be a problem with LDAP, the facility that handles your security, or a database could be down. So someone may call up and make a request, and the person handling that request may have to start triggering an escalation to be able to resolve a much wider problem than was originally realized from the customer point of view. ITIL helps you manage these situations so that you're not caught in a position where you're saying, oh my gosh, what do I do? I've got 50 people calling all of a sudden. The whole point of adopting an IT service framework is to be able to handle those sorts of incidents. So an incident is an unplanned interruption to an IT service. So, example might be that you're providing a database of information, and then all of a sudden that database is no longer available, or it could just be a reduction in the quality of an IT service. For example, the response time might suddenly go down because the number of servers you're using has been reduced due to some type of underlying problem. So reduction in the quality of an IT service. And we say that it's also the failure of a configuration item, even if no one has noticed yet. Now let me explain what that means. Configuration items. Now a configuration item might be a package of software. It might be a specific component. It might be a hardware device, such as a printer. And in this failure, as an example, what I'm giving, let's say the printer toner cartridge is no longer usable, and your device signals the help desk, and someone gets dispatched to fix that printer even before anybody's complained. So in that case, for failure of a configuration item, even if none of your customers have noticed, you've already got it fixed even before that call has come in. So ITIL helps you manage all of these service requests, whether they be determined internal through your own processes or from a call from a customer. And it's very important to know that incidents can be escalated into a problem, and that happens when you have to determine the root cause of one or more incidents. So if you know why something has happened, you know why the printer went down, that's great. But let's say that printer went down because of an underlying networking issue, and the help desk personnel are not aware of why that occurred. They may have to escalate this from an incident into a problem, which triggers a larger team of experts, including your networking guys, and they go and find out, what cable has gotten moved or what other change has occurred. Maybe it's something outside your company. They look for the root cause that is related to a particular problem. Now, the cause is not usually known in the beginning, otherwise you wouldn't trigger this type of investigation. But the whole point of the ITIL framework for escalating from an incident to a problem is that your problem management team starts the investigation and they manage that process. Now, all of this is related to what we call change management. Now, change is not always bad, but a lot of times people get used to the fact that every time they make a change to the system that some kind of a problem occurs. And I always try to tell people, if you control the changes in your organization, if you look at what the impacts are going to be, then you have far fewer problems. So change management is all about controlling changes to your environment. And that means handling requests for change. And in order to do that, most companies have what's called a change control board. The change control board, or the CCB, reviews requests for changes, or RFCs. Now, one of the really neat things about the ITIL framework is they point out that it's pretty common that change control experts are experts in process, but they might not know every technical nuance for every single configuration item that's going to be changed. So they have what's called a change advisory board, which is a CAB. And that's a group of experts who can advise on whether or not a change may have a downstream, obviously unintended impact. And, in my career, I've often worked in establishing change management functions. And one of the really neat things about the ITIL framework is they call out this separate group that, in practice, is really the right way to handle this, which is you have a team that they're just professionals at handling change and requests, and you have another team that is their advisors. And some people may serve on both, but you have your change advisory board who are the experts. And if you're going to change a port on a router, or if you're going to make some other change to have the environment switch from pointing to the QA database to the production database, there may be other changes that have to occur of a technical nature, and your change advisory board can help you and help avoid making a mistake. So asset management is another really important aspect of ITIL, and this is something that really have to consider in IT service management, and that is that the asset management involves keeping a record of all these configuration items. And once again, a configuration item could be a release of software, it could be a particular component of software, it might even be just a configuration file. Technically, it could just be a document. And commonly, it might be a hardware device. So all these things, all these configuration items, changes to them need to be managed. If anything occurs where a plug gets unpulled, those things have to be tracked as well. And it's essential in managing assets to manage their impact to a service. For example, if your printer goes down, obviously your service providing print facilities, that's going to be impacted as well. So asset management involves recording all changes to the configuration items that may be triggered by a service request or a request for change. So in IT service management, best practices are still just best practices. You may need to tailor your process, and the ITIL framework itself is extraordinary in that it doesn't try to say, everything fits under this. They also say the Co-ovare framework is another one of my favorite frameworks, exceptionally good guidance for how you should manage your processes. And, of course, industry standards such as ISO and the IEEE, which is where I serve on the configuration management working group, and we're also looking to start up a working group to develop some more of the standards for ITIL and Agile as well, for that matter. So IT service management is very much looking at the best practices that are recommended by experts, looking at whether or not you should tailor those processes, maybe trim them down a bit, and learn from that wisdom. And here's a great example. With a configuration management database, this is something that has just evolved in recent years where you have a specialized database, a CMDB, that gathers information. You might have one CMDB that handles ports on a firewall. You could have another CMDB that handles whether you're looking at the production version of a database or the QA version. So you have specialized CMDBs, and they feed to a top-level CMDB that receives updates, and they might, in fact, be federated together. All of these CMDBs get federated back up with what's called a configuration management system, which records the changes, who requested the change, who authorized the change, and what configuration items were effective. And most importantly, how do we back out the change if it turns out that we need to roll back to where we were? All of this is all about process improvement. You always need to look at what you've done before, try to iterate through making things a little bit better. I always tell people mistakes are good if you learn from them. You don't make the same mistake over and over again. A lot of times one mistake will help your team realize you need a little more ceremony in there. You need a little more process to avoid making that same mistake over and over again. So we're right back to why should we adopt the ITIL framework? Well, as we've talked about, it's a very well-respected set of industry best practices. It's recommended by the ITSMF, which is an extraordinary organization with industry leaders. It's extremely popular. You have lots of support for it. You're not the only organization looking at ITIL right now. Most large organizations are switching to manage their IT services using ITIL. And it can be customized to meet your needs. You don't need to adopt something just because it's in the model. If it doesn't make sense for your organization, you can tailor that so that it's more closely in alignment with what your goals and approaches are. And traceability. You got to know who made the change, who authorized the change, why it occurred, who carried it out, and that's very much part of why you would adopt the ITIL framework. And it's a well-defined, repeatable process. You'll get the same results on Monday as you would on a Tuesday. And most of all, I always tell people the reason you adopt an ITIL framework, the reason you do process improvement in the first place, is you want to make sure you've got delighted customers. So when they call up, they are happy with the results they get from contacting your IT service help desk. Now, let's go back to my USB stick. When I called up and I explained that I had lost the USB stick and I had this expensive set of headphones, and the help desk person initially told me they would not sell me a USB stick, and I was beginning to get pretty upset. But then she said to me, you know what, let me create a ticket for you, and we'll see if we can send you a replacement at no charge. And a week later, I get a box and a USB stick, and the company had, they'd shown me they valued me as a customer. And it's no surprise that a month later, I bought 2 or more of these headsets. So they had delighted me as a customer, and when I went to go buy more headsets of this type, I couldn't imagine going with a different product because my experience in dealing with them was so positive. So that's my contact information. I love to share best practices. Sky, I'm going to come back to you, and I hope that I've given you some background on why the ITIL framework is really an excellent place to start in terms of managing your IT services, your help desk function, and how it really adds value both in terms of productivity and quality to your organization. Guy?
Yes, thank you, Bob. That was actually great. I think it was very useful and helpful to understand why one should use ITIL for IT service management. All right, so let me change the presenter. See my screen, Bob? Okay. All right. So let's start with giving you an overview of how Co-ovare can actually help you in implementing ITIL in your organization. So let me start with ITIL lifecycle story, a very typical story, and you will find that the characters and the plot line is very familiar to you. Maybe the name's a little bit different. So it starts with a customer, whether it's an internal or external customer. They submit a help desk ticket, something like, I forgot my password, how can I run reports? So there are some questions, there are some service requests, etc. And it can come through a number of different channels. It can be submitted from a website, it can come through an email, or it can be submitted through Co-ovare application. And that help desk ticket, once submitted, it goes through a resolution process, and some of them actually get linked to incidents. And the incidents are something like power failure twice in last week, some pages are giving 500 error, etc. And the incident itself goes through incident review and tracking process. And some of these incidents now get linked to the problems. And these problems are as
muted.
I'm sorry. So the problem management, that also goes through a process, and those process have the connected to the changes, and the change goes through the change management process, and these are some of the changes. So to solve the problems, you need to make some changes to your configuration items, like different kinds of assets, right? So those are the different assets which need to be changed. And then once the changes are done, they are released, and that goes through a release management process. And during the whole time, there is the CMDB, which is basically the configuration items in a database, and it may be actually multiple CMDBs, all are federated together, as Bob actually has shown. Now, if you look at this particular lifecycle story, traditionally you need a number of different tools to really implement this particular story. But in Co-ovare, you can actually implement all of these different applications, whether it's a service request, whether incident management, problem management, change management, release management, CMDB, all of those can be implemented by Co-ovare alone. So that is one of the uniqueness of Co-ovare application. Now let's answer the question, so what is Co-ovare? So one way to look at Co-ovare is it is a single box of number of different applications in the area of application lifecycle management and IT service management. In the ALM side, we have requirements management, test management, issues management, etc. And in the ITSM side, we have the service request, incident management, problem, change, release management, etc. And all of these are delivered as a 100% web architected, web-based application. And this is especially very much applicable to a distributed team, globally distributed for a 24/7 global access. The second component of Co-ovare is its process technology. It is called Omnibus, and using this process technology, you can create, implement, and automate processes for any of the ITIL applications. As Bob mentioned, that process is one of the most important critical part of making it consistent and making it the same, whether it's a Monday, Tuesday, or for any day. And without the process, actually, it's almost impossible to be successful in ITIL. In Co-ovare, you can actually create these processes very easily using our drag and drop visual interface and automate the processes for each of these applications, whether it's a service request, incident management, change management, etc. The third component is Co-ovare's enterprise service bus integration technology called Omnibus. So using Co-ovare, you can integrate any third-party vendor tool or your own homegrown internal applications using this integration technology. For example, it can be another CMDB, or if you're using a different help desk system, you can integrate that too. And since it uses web services, which means that any of these tools can run on any platform anywhere in the world, even behind the firewall. And finally, Co-ovare is also a platform. So you can actually create your own user-defined application using Co-ovare, and these applications are as powerful as any other application, built-in application. As a matter of fact, all the built-in applications are also created using the same drag and drop configurability. You can also process enable your user-defined applications using Omnibus, or you can integrate your user-defined application with other tools and applications using our integration technology. So let's see what are the different ITIL services Co-ovare actually support. So for example, all the different service support, the service desk, incident management, problem management, change, release, and configuration management, all of them are supported by Co-ovare. As I have shown in my lifecycle story, actually all of them are covered by Co-ovare. Also, for the sake of completeness, these are also traditionally included in ITIL, but rarely the companies implement these things. But Co-ovare does not directly support each of these service delivery applications within Co-ovare, but it can some of these other applications. Now let's look at the different applications within Co-ovare. These are the different phases of ITIL, different applications. They also represent the tools in a number of different silos, like the organizational, functional, technological, or geographic silos. So let me give you a couple of examples. One is, let's say there is a support group of company A in Boston using a service desk tool on a Wintel PC. And there may be another group, which is an engineering group, working out of Bangalore for a company B, which may be an outsourcing company working on a change management tool on a different platform. Now, it is almost guaranteed that these tools are not talking to each other. And if they don't talk to each other, the service request, which is created in Boston, do not know that those service requests are to be converted into a change request, which is to be implemented in Bangalore. And because of the siloed natures of these tools, we find that there is no coordination or enforcement of any kind of defined processes. There may be some pockets of processes, but that's it. So also there is no relation between the artifacts which are entrapped in these different tools, as we have seen. There is no consolidated reporting. So if you have to create a report where you would like to show the service request, the configuration item, the change request, or the incidents together, you have to actually manually compile that, which is very tedious and cumbersome. And finally, there is no collaboration. The groups are all working in isolation. Now, if these are the problems, how do you solve it? The way we solve it is we put it in a single repository. That is the Co-ovare repository. Now, each of these applications is actually a built-in application within the Co-ovare framework. We also call them entities. Now, each of them, by their own right, can compete very well with any other standalone point tool. As a matter of fact, we have customers who have actually replaced very well-known help desk tools, very established help desk tools by Co-ovare because of its power in the service request management. On top of that, we also allow people to create their own user-defined entities or applications. Now, once we have all of these in a single repository, now actually we can do the collaboration, the process, the traceability, the report, all of these across all of these different applications, even when they are coming from different sources. Now, this is a very nice picture when you are using just Co-ovare in an organization. But unfortunately, the reality is a little different. When we go to an organization, we see that they are already using a number of different well-known tools, like here. These are the examples. And then we introduce Co-ovare with some of its own built-in applications. So the question is, how can we deliver the value we have seen in the previous slide when we had just one single repository? But in this case, we are working with multiple repositories from multiple tools. So the way we do it, we create all these different entities within Co-ovare, and then using Omnibus, our integration technology, we can have the integration between the external object in the external tools with the entities which are created in Co-ovare. And this integration can be synchronized, that means a both-way replication, or it can be federated when the actual data are still in the other tool, but they are fetched, for example, when you are doing a consolidated reporting on demand basis. Now, whatever be the way, synchronization or federation, once we have the data in Co-ovare repository, we can now actually have the collaboration, traceability, report, and process across all of these different applications, even when actual data are coming from different sources. So this is called the multi-repository ITIL, and Co-ovare is one of the very few tools which actually can do thanks to our Omnibus technology. Now let me show you how Co-ovare actually does these multiple applications. So let me go to the Co-ovare application. I'll not actually show a complete demo here, but I'll show you some of the screens of Co-ovare. These are the actual application I'm looking at. So in Co-ovare, if you look at the top, all these different tabs actually represent a particular application. So here we have the service request, incidents, problems, change request, companies. Companies basically means that these are your customers. So if you are actually providing support services to your customers, so the companies have that. The contact is all the different contacts. That means they may be coming from your customer or your internal contact, because service requests typically comes from the different individuals. Here's the configuration items. So as Bob has mentioned, these are the assets basically. This can be a software, can be a piece of hardware, maybe a network equipment, etc. Knowledge base, releases, issues. So these are all these different entities or applications created within the Co-ovare framework. Okay. Now let me show you, for example, let's go to the service request. I'm going to one of this list, and that shows the list of all these different kinds of items there. And for each one of them, actually we can track, and each one can be actually configured very, very precisely based on your own requirement for each of these applications. Okay, so let me also go to, for example, this configuration items as an example. And for example, if you look at by group by categories, that shows the computer, printer, network services, software, telecommunication services, all these different kinds of categories here. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation once again. All right, now let's talk about how these applications can work with each other. Now, just the application itself is not good enough. Having these applications together in a single tool has a great advantage. So for example, you can have this linking between these application items, and you can actually visualize them in a number of different ways. And Co-ovare actually gives you a number of different tools to do that. Remember, in the lifecycle story, from the service request, we can have the incidents, which is linked to the service request. From the incidents, we have the problem, from problem to change to release, etc. So those kinds of linking we should be able to kind of visualize in Co-ovare. So we have got actually three different tools here. One is using a relation diagram. The second one is a kind of hierarchical consolidated reporting, where you have the hierarchies of this relationship. And third is a matrix view. So let's go to Co-ovare and let's look at that. So this is actually a relation diagram. So let me make it a little bit bigger here. So if you look at it here, this is a service request, And this shows all the other items which are related to the service request at the first level. Now this is an incident. So service request 1 is related to the incident number 2. Now if I want to know what are the other items which is linked to this incident, whether there is any other service request which is related to this incident. So if I double click that, that actually shows me that this incident is also related to the service request 3. And as a matter of fact, there are other items also. For example, CI means this is a configuration item 109, which is also related to that. So using this relationship diagram, we can actually visually see the complex relationship between different items. Not only that, we can expand each of these nodes to see it more information as we expand it node by node. The second tool here is actually, this is a list of service requests, and we are looking at a traceability view here. And here, if I expand, for example, the service request number 1, the very first one, it shows me what are the incidents which are related to this particular service request. So it shows that incident number 2 is related to that. And if I now expand the incident, it will show me what are the problems which are related to this incident. So these are the problems which are related to incident. And then if I expand the problem, that will show me what are the changes which are related to the problem. So here is a kind of complete hierarchy starting from the service request to the incident, to the problem, to the change. And this is the kind of traceability Bob was talking about. And here is an example of a consolidated reporting of all these different applications working with each other, and we see that data from different tools, different applications are shown in a consolidated report. The next tool we have to see the relationship is a matrix diagram. So this is a matrix diagram between the service requests and incidents. So the rows are different service requests and the columns are different incidents. And the arrow shows that how the service requests actually is pointing to the incidents. And the arrow direction shows that if the service request is changed, then that will actually impact the incident. It may happen that a customer has submitted a particular service request, and based on that we have created an incident. And then customer came back and said that there is some changes in that service request. In that case, we need to know that because of that change, whether the actual incidents will be affected or not. And this arrow actually allows us to do that. Now, you also see that it shows some of these items highlighted. So because it shows that all highlights are orphans. So basically, these are the orphan items which are highlighted. These are the incidents which does not have any related service request. Similarly, if I go to the next page, as a matter of fact, that shows us that there are certain service requests also which does not have any incidents related. Why is it important? Because from this highlight we know there are certain incidents which are possibly has started its life independent of any service request. And also there are certain service requests which does not relate to any incidents. Now this particular view is not just a read-only view. We can actually create a relationship just by double-clicking a particular cell. So I just created this one by double-clicking this cell. Similarly, I can also delete it from here. So if I delete it, that is gone. So these tools are provided to you to create these kinds of relationship, manage these kinds of relationship very easily, so that you actually know that how all of these applications kind of work with each other. All right, so let's go back to our presentation once again. So the next thing is the process. As Bob has mentioned, the process is possibly one of the most critical part of the ITIL implementation. The process is, you have to find out the right process, because the processes actually will decide whether you can be successful or not. Because you can always start with a manual process, but our experience is that with a manual process, you have to actually depend on people's discipline, self-discipline for the success, and which in most of the cases, after some time, people do not follow the manual process, and that's why it fails. So an automated process is a very important thing in ITIL implementation. In Co-ovare, it is very easy to create these processes. And not only that, Co-ovare has a unique kind of process engine called the task-based process engine, which is superior to a state-based process engine. In a state-based process engine, an item, like a service request, can be in one state alone at any point of time. But with a task-based process engine, you can have multiple tasks being done simultaneously on the same service request, and you can assign different things to different people, asking them to different things. Also, we have the versioning of the processes because the process changes. It is almost impossible to get a perfect process the first time. Process itself, the process development itself is an iterative process. So Co-ovare actually gives you a way to manage the changes in the process by versioning of this process. Also, we have a very easy Visio-like drag and drop interface for creating these processes. And then also you can create multiple processes for multiple entities, and then you can synchronize between them. So that is another great thing in Co-ovare, is that you can have two processes. One is a service request, another for incident, and one can actually wait for the other to reach a particular state, and then only it will move to the next one. So let's look at the Co-ovare processes and how Co-ovare does the ITIL process automation. Okay, so this is the list of processes for service request. For every entity, for every application, we can actually have multiple processes. So here we have one process for customer ABC, another for customer XYZ, and then we have a default process for rest of the service request. So this actually allows you to create different kinds of processes for different scenarios. It may be based on different customer, or it may be based on the different kinds of service requests itself. So depending on your scenario, you can create these multiple different processes. And as you can see here, this default process actually has gone through a number of versions. So version 4 is the currently active version, and 1, 2, 3 are inactive versions. So this allows you to actually manage the changes in the process itself, which is very important in the ITIL. Okay, so let's look at one of such processes. So this is the service request process. Let me make it a little bigger here. So first of all, this is just like Visio, drag and drop, but unlike Visio, which is just a drawing program, Co-ovare has a lot of logic behind all these shapes. So for example, when a service request is started or created, it starts with the start node, and then it flows through all these different activities. So each of these rectangles is an activity. And you see that from an activity, there may be multiple different links coming out. So these are the conditional branches. So based on a particular condition, if that is satisfied, that particular branch or that particular path will be traversed. Now, as we come down, here are actually two nodes. You see here, one is going through a change path, another is going to the incident path. And here, for example, it is waiting for the change to be implemented, and here it is waiting for the incident to be resolved. So here is an example of the multiple processes are synchronized, kind of. One is waiting for the other process to be completed or to reach a particular state. So this particular service request, it is waiting for the incident to be resolved. When the incident is resolved, then it goes to the next activity to provide resolution. So this is actually a very unique thing in Co-ovare, that you have got all these different applications, and their processes, when implemented, they can be synchronized with each other at different synchronization points. Actually, the Co-ovare process is a very powerful, very flexible thing. So we can talk a lot about this process, and hopefully, if you're interested, we'll be able to give you a custom demo of how the Co-ovare process actually works. All right, so let's go back. Now, let's talk about the reporting and dashboarding. So one of the important things in ITIL is the metrics and reporting. So how do you know that whether all the different applications you have implemented, how are they performing? So for that, you need to not only, you have to gather the metrics, also you have to show those metrics in a meaningful way. So Co-ovare has a very colorful dashboarding capability. So we'll see that there can be a multiple different gadgets you can put on a dashboard. Not only that, you can have multiple dashboards, and based on your role, you can actually subscribe to these different dashboards. And all of these reports are calculated in real time. Other than dashboard, we also have a multiple different reporting engine. You can have HTML, Excel, Crystal, as well as Microsoft Word. And in the dashboard itself, you can do the drill down. That means from the dashboard, you can go to the actual item which kind of correspond to that particular dashboard report. So let's look at some of these reports here. So here is the dashboard. So this is, as I mentioned, that you can have multiple dashboards, and we are looking at the ITSM dashboard here. So for example, let's look at this one. So this is a service request submission trend. So it shows on a weekly basis how these different number of service requests are being submitted, and it shows per week the weekly number as well as the cumulative number, which is shown by this curve. So if I scroll it down, it shows many other different kinds of graphs. So for example, this is a service request distribution by status of the different status all these different service requests are in. First of all, I can change the graph type on the fly. So if I don't like that and I want to change it to something else, that is shown here. And also, this is a nice picture. You can actually save it as an image. But what is more important, that for example, I want to find out this 121 in progress, what are those items? So if I click on that particular element in the graph, it actually is shown in a pop-up window. Here it shows those 121 items which correspond to that particular element in the graph. So these are all active elements, and you can drill down directly from the graph itself. Now in a dashboard, typically most of these gadgets are graphical, but if you want, you can actually put even a textual report here. So for example, here you see these are the textual reports you can also put in as a gadget in the dashboard. So the dashboards are actually very useful. These are all calculated on real time. Let me also show some of the other types of reports here. So for example, here are some of these different kinds of reports. So if you look at here, we have a wide range of types, and from that you can create many different kinds of reports here, not just for one application, but multiple applications. Even within a single report, you can have data from multiple applications. So these are some of these canned reports we have created for this number of different kinds of applications. Now, one special kinds of report I want to show you, which is basically a Microsoft Word document. So let me show you that. So this is, for example, is a test compliance report. So this is actually a Microsoft Word document, and in that document you can, as a matter of fact, we have an add-on to Microsoft Word, and using that add-on you can create a template, and in that template you embed the different XML which actually retrieves data from Co-ovare. And then with a single click, this whole document is created based on the formatting you have done using the full formatting capability of Microsoft Word, but the actual data are all coming from Co-ovare. So here, for example, if we look at the content here, at the top we have the customer requests or customer requirements, and then under that we have the hardware system and software system requirements, and then we have the different kinds of test cases here. And these are all related with each other by the traceability relation. Okay, so this is not just a flat list. They are in the context of each other. Now, if we go to a particular item here, you see that this is the customer request. Under that, we have the hardware system requirement. By the way, we can also capture your rich text description of your request or requirements or incidents, or as a matter of fact, any description, which can be very rich with all the formatting of the fonts and the number, bullet, table, embedded images, as you can see here. So in these reports, all of those formatting are preserved. So after that, we have the test case here, and not only that, it also shows the number of test runs which have gone through this particular test case, and also the final run result. Okay. Now this is a very interesting report. That's why it is called a test compliance report. So you can give it to your customer and say, Mr. Customer, these are all the original requests you made, and those requests are basically generated a number of different changes or incidents or implementation in both hardware and software. Not only that, we made those changes, we have actually tested them multiple times, and these are the final test results, and all of them have passed. Now think about it, that if you have to create a report like this manually, first of all, it is almost impossible to create it. And even if you create it, to maintain that on a day-to-day basis as the things are changing dynamically almost minute by minute, and update that report manually is almost impossible. But in Co-ovare, you create that template, and with a single click you can generate this report anytime, and with a very nice formatting you can hand it over to your customer. So that is the power of the different kinds of built-in reporting engine Co-ovare has. So that's basically brings me to the end of my presentation here. So let's open it up for a question-answer session. Please use your questioning panel there. You see that there's a question panel. Please use that to ask any question you may have, and we'll be, both Bob and I'll love to answer those questions. Okay, so here is one question. How easy would it be to integrate into Sage ERP and CRM products given, so the question is that how do we integrate the Sage ERP or CRM products? Our Omnibus actually a very versatile integration engine. So what we normally do is create these different kinds of adapters for different tools. And since it is an ESB, Enterprise Service Bus, which means that our integration complexity is the order of n, when n is the number of tools. Whereas in a point-to-point integration, which most of the other vendors are, the order of complexity is in the order of n squared, which is much more complex, as you can very well understand. So for creating an Sage ERP and CRM integration, we need to create these adapters, and typically I would say on an average it takes about 6 to 8 man-weeks to create these adapters, but depending on the complexity of the integration it can take a little bit more or less. But I don't see any problem of doing this integration with Sage ERP and CRM. The next question is, if possible, can you also demo the integration with Test Director? Yes, sure, we can do that, not possibly today. But please talk to one of our sales guys, and you can send an email to sales@coovare.com. We'd love to give you a demonstration with the integration, especially with Test Director. Actually, Test Director is now known as Quality Center, which is originally from Marker Interactive, and now it is from HP. And we have a very nice integration with Quality Center, both not only for the test management, but both for requirements and defect as well. Okay, the next question is the word template is fixed or could be customized? It can be customized. Not only you can customize, but not just one, but as many as you want. And we, as I mentioned, that we have actually a add-on to Microsoft Word, and using that you can, as a matter of fact, customize or create these different kinds of templates. It's very easy, drag and drop. You don't have to write a single line of code. Everything is visual. Process workflows can be customized. Yes, absolutely. And that is the power of our process engine. So you can actually create your own process. And this is again going back to what Bob said, and which is so true, that typically for ITIL there are best practices, but best practices are basically best practices, but not necessarily it has to be followed. In many cases we find that our customers follow a proprietary process, maybe starting with the best practice and then fine-tune it for their culture based on their own requirement. And Co-ovare process engine is very easy to use and very powerful to implement those processes. As a matter of fact, one of our customers said it well. He said that if you can draw it on a piece of paper, you can implement it in Co-ovare. And that is so true. All right. Do you support complex SLA? Oh, very good. That's a nice question. As a matter of fact, interestingly, we are currently implementing for one of our Indian customers, and they actually provide service to their customers. And they have got some very complex SLAs to kind of support. So based on how complex or how critical are the service requests, they have a certain time limit within which they have to actually respond. Within a particular time, they have to resolve it, etc. So in Co-ovare, all of these times are actually calculated, first of all, gathered automatically. You don't have to enter those times because as the things are going through the process, Co-ovare already knows that how long does it take to actually start and complete a task. So it actually gathers all those information, calculates the complex SLA, and shows you in a metrics format that how your service requests are doing. What percentage of the service request is actually within SLA, how much are the SLA compliant, and how many are SLA non-compliant. So using Co-ovare's calculated field and other advanced kind of field types, you can actually implement that, interestingly, without writing a single line of code. Everything is by drag and drop. All right, the next question is, so especially for our Australian attendees, please feel free to call Richard. He is in Australia, and he'll be happy to show you additional demos of both in the ITSM area, ITIL area, as well as the ALM area. His number is 0412-433-167. Once again, 0412-433-167 in Australia. The next question is that, do we have any existing integration with Salesforce? No, we do not have any integration yet, but we are getting more and more kind of requests about that. And as I said, that it typically takes about 6 to 8 man-weeks to create an adapter. So if you're interested in a Salesforce integration, we'll be able to do it in 6 to 8 man-weeks. The next one is, this is about information. We are actually implementing a call center application in Australia using Co-ovare, and that is going to be up and running in January 2010. And that will also have a very complex SLA. As I mentioned, that one we are doing in India for one of our Indian customers, another we are doing for Australia. So I think that's basically all the questions we had, and we are also up with the time. Thank you very much for your attendance, and thank you, Bob, for an excellent presentation and helping with our attendees to understand why it is so important to have ITIL implemented for their ITSM. Thank you.